Hello, my young theologians and philosophers. Today I want to talk to you about answering 12 markers because it's something that you will do lots in your exam, 4 times in each exam, and lots of times we'll do it in class as well. And I know many of my students appreciate a chance to go back over a structure for how to get going. And once you know a structure, you can apply it to all the different topics. So you might be in year 9, you might be in year 10, you might be in humanities, tackling your first 12 marker. And hopefully, by keeping this quite general, I'm not going to go into specifics of any topics, you can see how you can apply the same structure to lots of different types of answers. So I'm going to share my screen to talk to you about how to do a 12 marker from my ideas, from examining, from teaching, this specification. This is what I think makes a good structure. Of course, once you got to grips with the structure, you can kind of go off and add things that you like. Some people like to answer it slightly differently, but lots of people like to just have a structure to start with. And so this is what I recommend. So the first thing you have to do, every 12 marker you get is a statement that's could be quite controversial or could have different views on it. And the point of your essay is to show the 2 views, but really you have to show a thesis. Now, this is kind of a fancy word for saying what your essay is going to argue. It could be your opinion. Obviously, it could be what you think, okay? But it doesn't have to be. It is what the essay is going to argue, okay? So that's what I'm going to refer to as thesis, and I put a little T when I'm showing you how we're basically saying this. You don't really say, my thesis is, but this is what you're doing. You're giving your thesis, the thing that your essay is going to argue. So obviously, if your essay's got to hang on this, I think it's really good to mention it in your introduction. There's 2 reasons. Firstly, you're showing your examiner or your teacher what your view is or what the view is of the essay right from the beginning. And the exam is testing whether you can do something called chains of reasoning. So you can show that your thinking has steps and has evidence, and why does this back up your view? So it's really important, I think, to start with the thesis. Also, I think it's really handy because I've got lots of essays, particularly this term, where people have kind of run out of time and they haven't said what they think. They've given views for and against, but they haven't actually said what they think or what their essay is arguing. So by doing it in the beginning, you've made sure you've covered that before you get cracking with the essay. There's essays that I think could have got a couple of extra marks if they just stated that at the beginning and had actually seen what the essay was going to argue, what their view was. So my way I like to say to my classes is your introduction. Really simple. This statement is suggesting that. You sort of reword the statement. You show me that you know what it means. Then pick a word from the statement that could be explained a bit further, that's important. So whatever the word is, means, and explain what it means, okay? So you're saying you know what the statement is, and then you're also saying you know what some of the key things are in the statement, okay? And then the crucial point, this essay will argue that the statement is correct or not correct, and that's your thesis. So that's why I put a T in brackets. So my essay is going to hinge on whether I think the statement is correct or not, okay? So I must end my paragraphs coming up on whether they support or not my thesis, okay? So paragraphs. I suggest that you have one sort of big paragraph saying why some people would agree with the statement, whether you do or don't, okay? Why some people do. So the 4 paragraph, why some people agree with the statement. And 1, why some people don't agree with the statement, against the statement, whether you would do or don't, against the statement. But remember I said it has to end on your thesis. So you have to be quite clever here and think, if I support the thesis, I obviously think that arguments for the thesis are really strong because I support it. If I support the statement, yeah, my 4 paragraph must have lots of strengths because it's convinced me that it's the most convincing argument. It's the strongest argument. So I will write my 4 paragraph, and at the end I'll say why it's strong. And if my essay is for the statement, then my against paragraph has to be weak because it hasn't convinced me. It doesn't convince me that the statement is incorrect. So therefore the against statement has to have weaknesses, or you could say unconvincing. I use the word weak, okay? But you can say unconvincing or not satisfying if you want to, like I said, add extra words. So this is really crucial. This is the thing that gets you up into 10 or 11 or 12 marks, is saying in your paragraphs whether they're strong or weak points, whether they convince you or not. So of course you can end on your thesis. The statement is correct or not, depending on the way you've argued. If I've argued in my essay that I'm against the statement, then my 4 paragraph has to end on weaknesses, because I am not convinced that the statement is correct. Therefore, the points must be weak. So I have to state a weakness. Okay? So like I say, this is for people particularly going for 10, 11, 12 out of 12. I think it's good if we all get in the habit of using this language, and you're doing it in the paragraphs rather than leaving it to the very end. Again, saving you time, you're doing it throughout your essay. So I'll say that one more time. You have a 4 paragraph where, and I set out, some people will argue the statement is correct, for example. I will give my evidence and explain it, and this is a weak or a strong argument because, ending on my thesis, depending on whether I agree with it or not, okay? Then my 2nd paragraph will be against. Other people, or Muslims or Christians, will argue the statement is incorrect because, and I'll give my evidence and explain it. And if that's not my actual view, I have to give a weakness. If it is my view, I have to give a strength. So my paragraphs might look fairly similar to me and someone next to me who's got a different thesis. We might use the same points. We might use the same examples, the same evidence, but it's whether we find that convincing and strong or weak will tip whether we are for or against the statement. So one more time, you do your introduction, then you've got a 4 paragraph and an against paragraph, but they must end on what my thesis is. They must end on whether I think those arguments are convincing or not. If it's the 4 paragraph and I'm for the statement, that's strong. If it's against paragraph and I'm against the statement, that's strong. Again, you can pause and rewatch this if that helps you. And then finally, I've done my introduction, I've done my paragraph 1, my paragraph 2, and in them I've ended on my thesis. I write my conclusion, which really is just summing up what I've said. I've already done the evaluation. I've already said the strengths and weaknesses and how it fits in my thesis. So my conclusion doesn't have to be very long. Of course, you can add to this when you're writing your essays if you like. Whilst the arguments for the statement are, it depends whether you agree with the statement or not. The arguments against the statement are, and that depends. You have to say which one you think is stronger at the end. So the arguments I've said here were strong, but these were weak, depending on my thesis. So then it's really simple. Therefore, the statement is correct or incorrect. I've just argued the points for and the points against and whether they're strong or not. So really, the takeaway from this is work out what your essay is going to argue, and then you hang all of your points on that, okay? You hang your for and against on what your essay is arguing. Remember, the examiner is looking for chains of reasoning. They call it logical chains of reasoning. So you're showing logically, using evidence, using evaluation, whether you agree with the statement or not. And again, remember, it doesn't have to actually be your view. If you're absolutely sat on the fence and you can't decide, then you're just arguing one side or the other. We could talk more in the future about more in-betweeny theses, if you like, but I think this is quite a simple way to get started with your 12 markers and really get your head around deciding what your thesis is, mention it in your introduction, come back to it in your paragraphs, and mention it in your conclusion. My sister taught me when I freaked out about essays when I first started A-levels. She said, you say what you're going to say it, and then you say what you've said. And I think that that's really stood me well in my studies, and I hope it helps you too. Okay, bye-bye.